We're going to talk today about revenue models. And really, it starts with the question, how will your startup generate revenue? Yeah, that's a really simple question. What I find, though, working with entrepreneurs is it gets a little bit complicated. It's not fully clear how we're going to generate revenue. And being an entrepreneur right in the middle of everything, sometimes it gets a little bit confusing. So today's video is going to be on revenue models in order to help you visualize how your startup's going to generate revenue so that you can communicate that, you can focus on that, and you can use that as a strategy to make sure that you have sufficient cash flow, because revenue is where our cash is coming from. Today we're going to do several models. We're going to do the direct model, the freemium, the advertising, the marketplace, and nonprofit. And what we find in the world of revenue models is that these are universal revenue models, and one of them just might be how your startup makes money. So your job as the entrepreneur is to learn these revenue models, know which one is applicable for your startup. If none of them fit exactly, then your job is to take the one that is close and then evolve that model into make sure that it captures exactly how your particular startup makes revenue. So let's jump into this. Direct revenue model is the first one we're going to talk about. Examples are food cart. So let's go ahead and do that food cart. Here we are, is our startup, and we are providing value to a consumer. And the value we're providing is that really yummy dessert that you are great at making. And what do the consumer provide back is value in money. They pay for the yummy dessert, and that money goes to you as a startup. Direct revenue model. Your revenue comes directly from the consumer who comes up to your business and gives you money for the value back. So here I want to talk about revenue models and the rules. Anytime value is going one way, value has to come back the other way. All of these models we talk about are going to illustrate that point. So yummy dessert, some tacos, whatever, going one way, money coming back. One of the distinctions we talked about in the Henry Ford Academy, if you remember, is the distinction between the customer and end user. And I want to point this one out for the direct revenue model just so that we're clear in that sometimes we can have a direct revenue model where we have a distinction between the customer who pays and the end user. Child's toy, as an example. Government and auto manufacturing. So let's do a child's toy. You've created a startup where you have developed a new child's toy. It's interactive. It's a lot of fun. Very popular. Well, the child actually does not pay you for the toy. Who pays you for the toy? The parent pays you for the toy. The child is the end user of the toy. So here's how we can then clarify where our money is coming from, which will lead us to our strategy on how we advertise and market to the correct customer. So in this instance, this is our startup. This is mom who wants to buy the toy. So she sends us money. We provide value to mom. What are we giving mom? We're giving mom a peace of mind that she's buying a great toy. It's safe. We're also giving mom time because when the child is playing with the toy, mom has extra time to go do other things. Mom provides the toy to the child. The child loves mom back. So mom gets something from the child, love, affection, happiness, whatever. So what I want to point out here is the distinction, and sometimes a mistake that we make in the entrepreneurship world is we say, hey, we're a startup making a child's toy, the customer is the child, but really we're forgetting a step in between, which is who's actually paying for the toy. So let's use the auto manufacturing as another example. So we've created a new airbag that goes in the car. And we're creating that airbag because we're like, we're going to save more people. It's safer. Therefore, the end user of the airbag is the car passenger, but they're not paying for the airbag. The auto manufacturer, Ford, is actually purchasing the airbag from us in order to install it into their automobiles that they then sell to their customers. So again, we are a startup that we've created a product that goes to an end user, but we need to be very certain and very clear as the entrepreneur who's paying. And typically the biggest catch in this is when we are creating something for the good of society, a new street light, a new technology that helps food distribution in the town or something. Well, who's striking the check for that? Okay, well, maybe it's the government striking the check for that product or service that we're developing, in which they will distribute it down to the good for society. So this is the direct, and then the customer end user that we talked about in the workshop, way to illustrate us to think about where exactly is our revenue coming from. So the next model we're going to do is freemium. Freemium example would be LinkedIn. So think about LinkedIn, how their revenue model works. Here we have the startup, your startup, but in this example, it's LinkedIn. They provide value to a consumer like you and me. I have a LinkedIn account, and I get value from LinkedIn because I can connect in the professional world. I can do some searches for people that I want to connect with, and I can reach out to them once I'm connected. But I don't pay for that. That is free. But really, then what the LinkedIn gets back from my being on their platform is access to me, and either that's through data or something else. So this is the free part of the freemium business model. The consumer gets value from the startup, access provided back, but it's free. I don't pay for anything. However, I may choose to pay a premium as a consumer So here is the revenue stream back to the startup. And what then I get as the premium is some premium functions, like I can do a job search, I can do unlimited emails, I could connect with further people, but I get some premium value back from the startup by paying. So think about your startup. Are you going to want to launch your organization and your startup to provide free value for the consumer? The benefit of that is there's no hurdle for that consumer to sign up for your platform. You ramp up the consumer base pretty quickly, but remember they're not paying. And then the attempt is to make them pay, have them pay for something, and then that is where your revenue stream is coming from. Okay, so the next business model we're going to do is advertising. And we are probably really familiar with the advertising business models. If anybody uses social media, you've experienced the advertising revenue model. Facebook, Instagram. Let's talk about those first. So here is the startup, your particular organization, but in this instance, let's say that's Facebook. Facebook provides the consumer value. Connection to friends, post pictures, talk about worldly events, things like that. And what the consumer provides back is data and access. So that's the value chain for this particular social media platform, Facebook, Instagram. Well, how do they make money? Well, they make money from advertisers. Here's the advertising company, sits over here. The advertiser gets back from Facebook that access channel and the data from the end consumer that is on the platform, and therefore they pay for it. So this is the revenue model for advertising. The advertisers pay our startup in order to have access to all the data we have, all the consumers we have, so that when you're on your Instagram account or your Facebook account, you have that advertisement pop up right on your feed. They know exactly who you are. They've paid for it. That's how that particular platform makes money. One of the things that I find about entrepreneurs is that they love to make applications. And the first question I always ask them is, how will your application generate revenue? Often applications don't generate revenue in the direct model because consumers aren't directly paying for that app. There are some few exceptions. Some of the new like Happify and things about meditating, people will pay for those apps directly. So that is one way to do it. But often the apps today are mostly free. So you're really going to have to say, hey, if my app is free to the consumer, how am I going to make money? And it's typically through some kind of advertising, selling of data, etc. So that's our advertising model. And the next one I want to talk about is a combination of two, freemium and advertising. So what we're going to find out is we could put an advertising model on top of anything, even a direct model, but let's talk about combining the freemium and advertising model, and you will see that an example is Spotify. Streaming music, you can get it for free, but then you pay a premium in order to do some things. So let's take a look at what this looks like. Here is your startup, and this is going to be Spotify. So we're going to first do the freemium. All right, I offer value streaming music to the consumer. The consumer provides back access and data to me to do something with it. They don't like the fact that they get commercials and other things like that. So that consumer is going to pay the premium. So here's one revenue stream. In order to get their premium function, which is downloadable music, and guess what? No ads. Okay, well, where were those ads coming from? They were coming from the other half of our revenue model of the advertising, because we have advertisers out here that want access to these consumers. So they pay for the data and access. So notice we have two payment channels now into our startup, two revenue streams, advertising and this consumer that wants to pay a premium so that they could do a bunch of things and not look at ads as well. So this is our freemium advertising model. Might be something you consider within your startup as well. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and show you how a direct model can also provide an advertising add-on, since I mentioned it. So this is our food cart, and we have a consumer here. We provide them a yummy dessert, and they pay us for it. And oh, by the way, while the consumer is standing there for our food cart startup, they're going to look at a sign, because somebody's going to pay us for us to give them access to this consumer, because we're going to put a little advertising sign on our food cart that basically says, hey, local gym opening up, memberships are discounted, go check it out. So because of that advertising space on our direct model, on our food cart, we now actually have two revenue streams that we could use. So again, an example of how we can just tack on an advertising revenue stream really within multiple models that we talk about, including the direct. So advertising freemium, advertising direct. Next business model we're going to do is the marketplace, and I have it drawn up here already. This is a really exciting revenue model for startups. It's an emerging revenue model, and so let's talk about it. Marketplace. Examples are Uber and eBay. So what is a marketplace exactly? So a market is created by the startup. So the startup creates value in the marketplace by creating this market where they bring consumer number one and consumer number two together. Within the market, there is an exchange of value for money, and the startup then takes some of that transaction of money back to themselves as their revenue. That could be a commission, it could be an entry fee, or something like that. So let's just take Uber as an example. This consumer is somebody who wants to drive their car around town, make a little extra money, and by providing a ride to another consumer out there who doesn't want to take a taxi, but instead wants to get from point A to B and use Uber. So Uber comes along and creates this marketplace, which is really through their application on smartphones, where this consumer and this consumer connect. Hey, I need a ride to the airport. Oh, great. I will give you a ride to the airport. I'll come pick you up. Money is exchanged actually through the app, and then value is given back to this consumer. Through the app, then, a percent of that, I'm not quite sure what Uber takes, but a percentage of that then comes back to the startup. So that is how revenue is generated. eBay, as an example, this consumer is looking for a great piece of art. This consumer has some art out there that is used and they want to sell it. So the art goes to this person pays for it, and then eBay takes a percentage of that or a portion of it back as their revenue. So this is a marketplace. It's a very powerful revenue model. There are some unique challenges I want to point out, though, about a marketplace revenue model. The startup has to manage the balance of just enough of these consumers with just enough of these consumers. So imagine Uber opens up in a new city. Let's say they're going to New York. I mean, they're already there. But what happens in New York if they don't have enough Uber drivers and they have a ton of people who want rides? All of a sudden, the quality of that service won't be very good because people won't be able to get rides. And on the other hand, if they have all the Uber drivers, but nobody wants a ride, well, then these Uber drivers are just going to go do something else. They're not making any money. So a complication of the marketplace is you have to manage this customer segment and this customer segment and ramp them up basically at the same time and at the same rate, or else you have mismatched challenges. So this is a marketplace. Always get asked about nonprofit revenue models, so I decided to go ahead and go through what a nonprofit revenue model looks like. And I have it drawn up here. There's some key distinction in this revenue model that we need to understand when we want to create a startup in the nonprofit world. So here we are as a startup in the nonprofit world, and an example could be the Red Cross or local education. Donate money and we'll support local education with free books, things like that. Could be an animal shelter. Hey, donate, and we're going to take care of the animals in the area, make sure they find a new home. So that would be examples of a nonprofit startup that you want to create. So here you are. And this is what the entrepreneurs typically most focus on, is providing the value to the consumer in need. Well, guess what? The consumer in need is not paying anything for the value we're providing them. So as an example, there's a natural disaster somewhere. We are part of a startup or nonprofit that we're providing disaster relief. So we send food, clothing, water into that particular area for natural disaster. And really, no money comes back. But you know what? We need to support ourselves from a revenue standpoint. But the rules of revenue modeling is that Every time value goes one way, something has to come back. And here's what's coming back from this particular natural disaster. I'm going to call it access. It's the word we've been using the whole time. We have access to these consumers in need. And this is important because actually what we are raising money is on the access that we provide to donors. All right, so over here, where's our money come from? It's a nonprofit. Money comes from donors. So here's the world of donors out there. These are all of them. Individuals, you and me, giving money to the startup could come in forms of grants, foundations, the government. They can all provide revenue through donations into our startup. So that's where we get our revenue stream. Well, what are we giving them back? Interesting question, right? Really, what we are giving back to the individuals, the grant writers, and the government is the ability for them to make a difference over here because, frankly, I can't help these people as an individual. So I'm going to give my $5 to this startup so that they can send food and clothing to these consumers in need. And what I get back is the feel-good access that I made a difference and the ability to make the difference. So that's the value that this startup is providing me, is the ability to make a difference somewhere else in the world, whether that be a difference in education, in animal shelter. Well, listen, this is highly competitive. This is challenging market here in order to get money, because not only as an individual can I give money for disaster relief, but you know what? Maybe I like to give money over here instead to animal shelters, or I want to give money over here instead to education. So the key point to take away on this is, even though you're a startup in the market of natural disasters, you still compete against all the dollars out there that are going to all the other nonprofits like animal shelters, education. And what I see is a huge challenge for startups in the nonprofit is they're like, oh, well, I'm just going to go to the local company in town that, they make a lot of money and they want to give to charities. Well, guess what? They've already chosen the charities that they're giving money to, the nonprofits they're giving money to, and it's not yours, and they're not going to give to you because they're already giving to somebody else. So think about yourself as an example. What nonprofits do you give money to? Is it one or two? Is it a multiple? So that you can start to see the challenge here about how highly competitive this is. This is where you're providing value to the consumer in need. You need to provide value back to the donors through access and the ability to make a difference. And you are competing basically in a highly competitive marketplace in order to try to get money, because everybody's giving grants, money to other places, not just the domain you're in. And so that's our nonprofit revenue model.